Chapter 18, Dr. Seward's Diary. 30th September. I got home at 5 o'clock and found that Glodeming and Morris had not only arrived, but had already studied the transcript of the various diaries and letters for which Harker and his wonderful wife had made it arranged. Harker had not yet returned from his visit to the carrier's men, of whom Dr. Hennessy had written to me. Mrs. Harker gave us a cup of tea, and I can honestly say, for the first time since I have lived in it, this old house seemed like home. When he had finished, Mrs. Harker said, "Dr. Seward, may I ask a favor? I want to see your patient, Mr. Renfield. Do let me see him. What you've said of him in your diary interests me so much." She looked so appealing and so pretty that I could hardly refuse her, and there was no possible reason why I should, so I took her with me. When I went into the room, I told the man that a lady would like to see him, to which he simply answered, "Why?" "She is going through the house and wants to see everyone in it," I answered. "Oh, very well," he said. "Let her come in, and by all means. But just wait a minute till I tidy up the place." His method of tidying up was peculiar. He simply swallowed all the flies and spiders in the box before I could stop him. It was quite evident that he feared or was jealous of some interference. When he got through with his disgusting task, he said cheerfully, "Let the lady come in," and sat down on the edge of his bed with his head down, but his eyelids raised so he could see her as she entered. For a moment I thought he might have some homicidal intent. I remembered how quiet he got just before he attacked me in my own study, and I took care to stand where I could seize him at once if he attempted to spring at her. She came into the room with easy gracefulness, which at once commanded the respect of any lunatic, for easiness in one is the qualities of mad people most respect. She walked over to him, smiling pleasantly, and held out her hand. "Good evening, Mr. Renfield," said she. "You know, I know of you, for Dr. Stewart has told me of you." He made no immediate reply, but eyed her all over intently, and with a set frown upon his face. This look gave way to one of wonder, which merged into doubt. Then, in my intense astonishment, he said, "You're not the girl the doctor wanted to marry, are you? You can't be, you know, for she's dead." Mrs. Harker smiled sweetly and replied, "Oh, no, I have a husband of my own, to which I had been married to before I even saw Dr. Seward, or he me. I am Mrs. Harker." "Then what are you doing here?" "My husband and I are staying on to visit with Dr. Seward." "Then don't stay." "But why not?" I thought that this style of conversation might not be pleasant to Mrs. Harker any more it was to me. Then I joined in. "How do you know I wanted to marry anyone?" His reply was simply contemptuous, given a pause in which he turned his eyes from Mrs. Harker to me, instantly turning them back again. "What an asinine question!" "I don't see that at all, Mr. Renfield," said Mrs. Harker, once again championing me. He replied to her with as much courtesy and respect as he had shown contempt to me. "You will, of course, understand, Mrs. Harker, that when a man is so loved and honored as our host is, everything regarding him is of interest in our little community. Dr. Seward is loved not only by his household and his friends, but even by his patients, who, being some of them hardly in the mental equilibrium, are apt to distort causes and effects. Since myself have been an inmate of this lunatic asylum, I cannot but notice the sophisticated tendencies of some of its inmates lean towards the errors of non causa and ignora entati." I positively opened my eyes at this new development. Here was my own pet lunatic, the most pronounced of his type that I ever met, talking elemental philosophy and with the manner of a polished gentleman. I wondered if it was Mrs. Harker's presence which had touched some chord in his memory. If this new phase was spontaneous or in any way due to her unconscious influence on him, she must have some rare gift or power. We continued to talk for some time, and seeing as he was seemingly quite reasonable, she ventured, looking at me questioningly as she began to lead him to his favorite topic. I was again astonished, for he addressed himself to the question of the impartiality of the contemplator's insanity. He even took himself as an example when he mentioned certain things. Why, I myself am an instinct of a man who has a strange belief. Indeed, there is no small wonder that my friends are alarmed, and insisted that my being put under control. I used to fancy that life was a positive and perpetual entity, and that by consuming a multitude of living things, no matter how low on the scale of creation, one might indefinitely prolong life. At times I felt that belief so strongly that I actually tried to take human life. The doctor here will bear me out on that one occasion where I tried to kill him for the purpose of strengthening my own vital powers by the assimilation with my own body of his life through the medium of his blood, relying, of course, upon the sexual phase. For blood is life. Though indeed the vendor of a certain nostrum has vigorously the truism of the very point of contempt. Isn't that true, doctor? I nodded absent, for I was so amazed I hardly knew what to think or say. It's so hard to imagine that I had seen him eat spiders and flies not 5 minutes before. Looking at my watch, I saw I should go to the station to meet Van Helsing, so I told Mrs. Harker that it was time to leave. She came at once, after saying pleasantly to Mr. Renfield, "Goodbye, and I hope I may see you often, under auspices pleasanter to yourself." To which, to my astonishment, he replied, "Goodbye, my dear. I pray God that I may never see your sweet face again. May he bless and keep you." When I went to meet at the station to meet Van Helsing, I left the boys behind me. Poor Art seemed more cheerful than he had been since Lucy first took ill, and Quincy is more like his own bright self than he had been in for many a long day. Van Helsing stepped from the carriage with his eager nimbleness of a boy. He saw me at once and rushed over, saying, "Ah, friend John, how goes all? Well? So I have been busy, for I come here to stay if needed. All affairs are settled with me, and I have much to tell. Madam Mina is with you?" "Yes. And her so fine husband? And Arthur and my friend Quincy, they are with you too? Good, good." As I drove to the house, I told him of what had passed, and how my own diary had come to be of some use through Mrs. Harker's suggestion, which the professor interrupted me. "Ah, that's wonderful, Madam Mina. She has man's brain, a brain that man should have much gifted, and a woman's heart. The good God fashioned her for a purpose, believe me, when he made so good a combination. Friend John, up to now fortune has made that woman of help to us. After tonight she must not have to do anything with this terrible affair again. It's not good that she run the risk so great. We men are determined, nay, are we not pledged to destroy this monster? But this is not part for the woman. If she ever not be harmed, her heart may fail so much and many horrors, and hereafter she may suffer, both in waking from her nerves and in sleep from her dreams. And besides, she is a young woman, and not so long after married. There are many other things to think of in some time now, if not now. So you will tell me what she wrote all, and then she must consult with us. But tomorrow she say goodbye to this work, and we go alone." I agreed with him wholeheartedly, and then I told him of what we had in his absence, that the house in which Dracula had bought was the very next to our own. He was amazed, and a great concern seemed to come over him. "Oh, that we had known it before," he said. "For me, I might have reached him in time to save poor Lucy. However, the milk that is spilt cries not afterwards, as you say. We shall not think of that, and go about our way to the end." Then he fell into a silence that lasted till we entered my own great way. Before we went to prepare for dinner, he said to Mrs. Harker, "I told you, Madam Mina, that my friend Jean, that you and your husband have to put up in exact order all things that have been up to this very moment." "Not up to this moment, Professor," she said impulsively, "but up to this morning." "Then why are the 9 up to now? We have seen here or there the good light of all things that have made little. We have told our secrets, and yet no one has told it reverse for it. Mrs. Harker began to blush, and take a piece of paper from her pocket, said, Dr. Van Helsing, would you read this and tell me if it must go in? It is my record of today. I too have seen the need of putting down at present everything, however trivial, but there is little in this except for what is personal. Must it go in? The professor read it over gravely and handed it back, saying, It needs not go in if you do not wish it, but I pray it may. It can but make your husband love you all the more, and all of us, your friends, more honor you, for as well as most esteem and love. She then took it back with another blush and a bright smile. And so now, up to this very hour, all records that we have completed are in order. The professor took away one copy to study after dinner and before our meeting, which is fixed for 9 o'clock. The rest of us have already read everything. So when we meet in the study, we shall be informed of all the facts as can be, and can arrange our plan to battle with this terrible and mysterious enemy. Mina Harker's journal. 30th September. When we met in Dr. Seward's study 2 hours after dinner, which had been at 6 o'clock, we unconsciously formed a sort of board or committee. Professor Van Helsing took the head of the table, to which Dr. Seward motioned him as he came to the room. He had me sit next to him to his right, and asked me to act as secretary. Jonathan sat next to me. Opposite us were Lord Godalming, Dr. Seward, and Mr. Morris. Lord Godalming being sitting next to the professor, and Dr. Seward was in the center. The professor said, I suppose, take it that we are all acquainted with the facts that are in these papers? We all expressed our absent, and he went on. Then I think it good that I tell you something of the kind of enemy for which we have to deal. I shall then make known to something the view of the history of this man, which has been ascertained for me, so that we may discuss how we shall act and take our measure according. There are such beings as vampires. Some of us have evidence that they exist already. Even had we not the proof of our own haunting existence, the teachings and records of the past give proof enough for sane people. I admit that at first I was skeptic. That not through the long years I have trained myself to keep an open mind. I could not have believed to such time, in fact, as the fact thunder enough for my ears. See, I prove, alas! Had I known at the first what I now know, nay, had I even guessed at him, so precious a life would have been spared to so many of us who did love her. But that is gone, and we must work, that other poor souls not perish, so that we can save. The Nosferatu do not die like the bee once he is stung once. He is only stronger, and his being stronger, have yet more power to work evil. This vampire, which is amongst us, is of himself so strong in person as 20 men. He is of cunning more than mortal, for his cunning be growth of ages. He has still the aids of necromancy, which is, as intermodally implied, the divination of the dead, and all the dead that he can come nigh to him for him at his command. He is brute, and more than brute, he is devil in callous. At the heart of him is not. He is, within limitations, appear at will, when and where, and in any form to be to him. He can, within range, direct the elements, the storm, the fog, the thunder, and he can command all the meaner things, the rat, the owl, and the vat, the moth, the fox, and the wolf. He can grow and become small, and at times can vanish and come unknown. How then are we to strike to destroy him? How shall we find where he is? And how can we destroy? My friends, this is much. This is a very terrible task we undertake, and this may very well have the consequences to make the bravest shudder. For if we fail in this fight, our fight, he must surely win. And when we end it, life is nothing, I heed him not, but to fail here is not mere life and death, it is that we become as him, that we henceforth become foul things of the night like him, without heart or conscience, preying on the bodies and the souls of those we love best. To us forever are the gates of heaven shut, for who shall open them to us again? We go on out all the time abhorrent of all, a blot on the face of God's sunshine, an arrow in the face of the side of him who died for man, but we are face to face with duty, and in such a case must we shrink. For we, I say no, for I am old, and life in his sunshine, his fair places, his song of birds, his music, and his love lie far behind. You others are young. Some have seen sorrow, but there are fairer days in store. What say you? Whilst we were speaking, Jonathan had taken my hand. I feared oh so much that the appalling nature of our danger was overcoming him when I saw his hand stretch out, but it was life to me to feel its touch. So strong, so self-reliant, so resolute. A brave man's hands can speak for itself. It does not even need a woman's love to hear its music. When the professor had done all the speaking, my husband looked in my eyes, and I in his. There is no need to speak between us. I answer for Mina and myself, he said. Count me in, Professor, said Mr. Quincy Morris, lackily as usual. I am with you, said Lord Godalming, for Lucy's sake, if for no others. Dr. Seward simply nodded. The professor stood up, and then laying his golden crucifix on the table, held out our hands at either side. I took his hand, and Lord Godalming his left. Jonathan held my right as his left, and stretched across to Mr. Morris. So we all took each other's hands. Our solemn pact was made. I felt my heart ice cold, but it did not even occur to me to draw back. We resumed our places, and Dr. Van Helsing went on with a sort of cheerfulness which showed that the serious work had begun. It was to be taken as gravely and as businesslike as a way as any other transaction of life. Well, you know what we have to contend against, but we too are not without strength. We have on our side the power of combination, a power denied to the vampire kind. We have sources of science. We are free to act and to think, and the hours of the day and the night are ours equally. In fact, so far our powers extend, they are unfettered, and we are free to use them. We have self-devotion in our chaos, and an end to achieve, if not a selfish one. These things are much. Now let us see how far the general powers arrayed against us are restrict, and how the individual cannot. In fine, let us consider the limitations of the vampire in general, and of this one in particular. All we have to go on are traditions and superstitions. These do not at the first appear much. Then the matter is of life and death, nay, of more than life, of either of death. Yet we must be satisfied. In the first place, because we have to, by all other means at our control, and secondly, because after all these things, tradition and superstition are everything. Does not the belief of vampires for the rest, though not, alas, for us, on them? A year ago, which of us have received such a possibility? In the midst of our scientific, skeptical, matter-of-fact 19th century? Yeah. We've even scattered the belief that we've saw justified under our own eyes. Take it then that the vampire and the belief of his limitations and his cure rest for the moment on the same base. For, let me tell you, he known everything that might have been. In old Greece and old Rome, he flourished in Germany, all over places. In France, India, even the Chinese, and in China, so far from us in all ways that even there he is, and the peoples fear him to this day. He have followed the wake of the berserker in Icelander, the devil Ganoten Hun, the Slav, the Saxon, the Magyar. So far, then, we have our way to act upon. And let me tell you, the very much of our belief is justified by what we have seen with our own unhappy experience. The vampire live on and cannot die by merely passage of time. He can flourish, and that would keep, and when he can fatten on the blood of the living, even more, we have seen that amongst us he can even grow stronger yet, that his vital faculties grow strenuous, and seem that though they refresh themselves when his special palliatum is plenty, but he cannot flourish without his diet. He eat not as others. Even friend Jonathan, who lived with him for weeks, did not see him eat. Never. He throws no shadow. He makes in the mirror no reflection, as Jonathan observed. He has the strength of many in his hand. Witness again Jonathan when he shut the door against the wolves, and when he helped him from the diligence too. He can transform himself to a wolf, as we gather from the ship in Whitby when he tear open the dog. He can come as bat, as Manamita saw at the window at Whitby, and as friend John saw him fly by this near house, and as my friend Quincy saw him at the window of Miss Lucy. He can come in as mists which he create. That noble ship's captain proved this to him. But from what we know, the distance he can make this mist is limited, and he can only be round himself. He come only on moonlight rays as elemental dust, as Jonathan saw those sisters in the castle of Dracula. He can become so small. We saw ourselves, Miss Lucy, ere she was at peace, slip through the hair's breadth space of the tomb door. He can, when we once find his way, come from anything or into anything, no matter how close it is bound or even fused with fire. Solder, you call it. He can see in the dark, no small power, no spout power, this, in a world where one half shut in light. Ah, but hear me though. He can do all these things, and yet he is not free. Nay, he is more prisoner than slave of this galley, that the madman in his cell. He cannot go where he lists. He is not of nature, yet he is to obey some of nature's laws, which we know not. He cannot enter anywhere at first unless there be some sort of household who bid him to come. Then afterwards he can come and go as he please. His powers cease, as he does all evil things, by the coming of the day. Only at certain times can he have limited freedom. If he be not at the place where he is bound, he can only change himself at noon or exactly sunrise or sunset. These things were told, and in the record of ourselves were proven in interference. Thus, whereas he can only do and will within his limit, when he have his earth home, his coffin home, his hell home, this place unhallowed, as we saw when he went to the grave of the suicide at Whitby, still at other times he can only change when the time come. It is said, too, that he can only pass running water at the slack or the flood of the tide. Then there are things which so afflict him that he has no power, as the Gallic, as we know of, and of things sacred. Thus this symbol, my crucifix, for which amongst us even now we resolved. To them he is nothing, but in their presence he takes his place far and silent with respect. There are others too, which I shall tell of you, lest in our seeking we may need them. The branch of red roses kept in his coffin keep him, that he move not far from it. A sacred bullet fired from into that coffin kill him, so that he may be truly dead. And for the sake of through him, we shall know of its peace. We already know of its peace, or to cut off his head and give it rest. We have seen it with our own eyes. Thus we will find the habitation of this man that was. We will confine him in his coffin and destroy him, if we obey what we know. But he is clever. I have asked my friend Armas of Budapest University to make his record, and from by all means that there are, he tell me of what he has been. He must indeed have been that voivode Dracula, who won his name against the Turk over the great river on the frontier of Turkeyland. If it may be, then he is no common man, for in that time, and for centuries after, he was spoken of as the cleverest and most cunning, as well as the bravest of the sons of the land beyond the forests. That mighty brain and that iron resolution with him to his grave, and even now arrayed against us. The Draculas were, Arminius says, a great and noble race, though now and again were scions who were held by their corrivals to have dealings with the evil one. They've learned his secrets in the Skosomans amongst the mountains over Lake Hampstead, where the devil claims the 10th scholar as his due. In the records, such as the words Stoker'S, witch, Ordog, or Porlock, Satan, and hell, and in one manuscript, this very Dracula is spoken as vampire, which we all understand too well. There have been from the loins of this very great man and great women, and their graves made sacred with the earth, where alone this foulness can dwell. For it is not the least of its terrors of this evil thing is rooted in all our good. In soil barren of holy memories it cannot rest. Whilst we were talking, Mr. Morris looked steadily at the window, and he now quickly got up and went from the room. There was a little pause, but then the professor went on. And now we must settle on what to do. We have much data, and we must proceed to lay out our campaign. We know from the inquiry of Jonathan that from the church in Whitby came 50 boxes of earth, all of which were delivered at Carfax. We also know that at least some of the boxes have been removed. It seems to me that our first step to be ascertaining whether all the rest remain in the house beyond that wall where we can look today, or whether any more have been removed. If the latter, we can trace. Here he was interrupted in a very startling way. Outside the house came the sound of a pistol shot. The glass of the window shattered with a bullet, which came ricocheting off the top of the embrasure, struck the far side of the wall of the room. I am afraid I am at heart a coward, for I shrieked. The men jumped to their feet. Lord Glodamine flew over to the window and threw open the sash. As he did, we heard Mr. Morris's voice without. "Sorry, I feared I've alarmed y'all. I shall come in and tell you all about it." A minute later, and he came in and said, "It was an idiotic thing of me to do when I asked you my pardon, Mrs. Harker, most sincerely. I fear I must have frightened you terribly, but the fact is that whilst the professor was talking, there came a big bat that sat on the window sill. I got such a horror of damn brutes of recent events that I can't stand them, and I went over to have a shot, as I've been doing lately of evenings, whenever I seen one." "You used to laugh at me for it then, Art." "Did you hit it?" asked Professor Van Helsing. "I don't know, I fancy not, for it just flew away into the wood." Without saying another word, he took his seat, and the professor began to resume his statement. "We must trace each of these boxes, and when we are ready, we must either capture or kill the monster in his lair, or we must, so to speak, sterilize the earth, so that no more he can seek safety in it. Thus, in the end, we may find him in his form of a man before the hours of noon and sunset. So engage him with him he must at his most weakest. And now for you, Madam Mina. The night is at the end until all be well. You are too precious for us to take such a risk. When we part tonight, you must no more question. We shall tell you all in good time. We amend and we are able to bear, but you are our star and our hope, and we shall act all the more free that you are not in any danger, such as we are." All the men, even Jonathan, seemed relieved, but it did not seem to me the good that they should brave danger and perhaps lessen their safety, strengthen being the best safety, through care of me. But their minds were made up, and though it was a bitter pill for me to swallow, I could say nothing, save accept their chivalrous care of me. Mr. Morris resumed the discussion. "And there's no time to lose. I vote we take a look at the house right now. Time is everything with him, and a swift action on our part may save another victim." I owe that my heart began to fail me when the time comes for action came so close, but I did not say anything, for I had a greater fear that if I appeared to drag or hindrance their work, they might even leave me out of their counsels altogether. They have now gone off to Carfax, which means to get into the house. Man-like, they told me to go to bed and sleep, as if a woman can sleep when those that she loves are in danger. I shall lie down and pretend to sleep, lest Jonathan add anxiety about me when he returns. Dr. Seward's Diary. 1st October, 4 a.m. Just as we were about to leave the house, an urgent message was brought to me from Renfield to know if I would see him at once, as he had something of the utmost importance to say to me. I told the messenger to say that I would attend his wishes in the morning. I was busy at the moment, but the attendant added, "He seemed very impatient, sir. I have not seen him so eager. I don't know what about, but if you don't go and see him soon, he may have one of his more violent fits." I knew the man would not have said this without some cause, so I said, "All right, I'll go." And I asked the others to wait 5 minutes for me, as I had to go see my patient. "Take me with you, friend John," said the professor. "His case in your diary interests me much, and it has much bearing, too. Now and again, for our case, I would much like to see him, and especially with his mind is disturbed." "May I come also?" asked Lord Godalming. "Me too?" said Quincey Morris. "May I come?" said Harker. I nodded, and we all went down the passage together. We found him in a state of considerable excitement, but far more rational in his speech and manner than I had ever seen him. There was an unusual understanding of himself, which was unlike anything I had ever met from a lunatic. He took it for granted that his reason would prevail when others sincerely sane. We all four met in the room, but none of the others at first said anything. His request would that he would at once see him once released him from the asylum and sent him home. This backed him up with arguments regarding his complete recovery and alluded to his own existing sanity. "I appeal to your friends," he said. "They will perhaps not mind sitting in judgment on my case. By the way, you have not introduced me." I was so astonished at the oddness of introducing a madman in an asylum did not strike me for the moment, and besides, there was a certain dignity in the man's manner, so much of the habit of equality that I had once made the introductions. "Lord Godalming, Professor Van Helsing, Mr. Quincey Morris of Texas, Mr. Renfield." He shook hands with each of them, saying in turn, "Ah, Lord Godalming, I have had the honor of seconding your father at Windham. I grieve to know that by holding the title he is no more. He was a man loved and honored by all who knew him, and in his youth I had heard the inventor of a blunt rum punch much patronized on Derby night. Mr. Morris, you should be proud of your great state. Its reception into the Union was a precedent which have made far-reaching effects thereafter when the Pole and the Tropics made hold alliances to the Stars and Stripes. The power of treaty may yet prove a vast engine of enlargement when the Monroe Doctrine takes its true place in political fable. What shall any man say of his pleasure of meeting Van Helsing? Sir, I make no apologies for dropping all forms of conventional prefix. When an individual has revolutionized therapeutics by his discovery of the continuous evolution of brain matter, conventional forms are unfitting, since they would seem to limit him to one of a class. Ha! You gentlemen who by nationality, by heredity, or by possession of natural gifts are fitted to hold your respective places in this moving world, I take witness that I am as sane as at least the majority of men who are in full possession of their liberties. And I am sure you, Dr. Seward, humanitarian and medico-jurist, as well as scientist, will deem it moral duty to deal with me as one would be considering under exceptional circumstances." He made this appeal with the courtly air of conviction which was not without its own charm. I think we were all staggered. For my own part, I was under the conviction, despite my knowledge of the man's character and history, that his reason had been restored, and I felt under a strong impulse to tell him that I was satisfied as to his sanity, and would see that the necessary formalities of his release in the morning. I thought it better to wait, however, before making a grave statement, for as of old I knew such changes to which this particular patient was liable. So I content myself with making a general statement, as he appeared to be improving very rapidly, that I would have a longer chat with him in the morning, than see what I could do in his direction of meeting his wishes. This did not at all satisfy him, for he said quickly, "But I fear that, Dr. Seward, that you hardly apprehend my wish. I desire to go at once, here, now, this very hour, this very moment, if I may. Time passes, and in our implied agreement with the old Scythermen, that it is of the essence of the contract that I am sure that it is only necessary to put before so admirable a practitioner as Dr. Seward so simply, but yet so momentously a wish, to ensure its fulfillment. He looked keenly at me, and seeing the negativity in my face, turned to the others, and scrutinized them carefully. Not meeting any sufficient response, he went on, "Is it possible that I have erred in my supposition?" "You have," I said frankly, but at the same time I felt brutally. There was a considerable pause, and then he said slowly, "Then I suppose that I must only shift my ground of request. Let me ask for this concession, a boon, privilege, if you will. I am content to implore in such a case, not on personal grounds, but for the sake of others. I am not at liberty to give you the whole of my reasons, but you may, I assure you, take it from me that they are good ones, sound and unselfish, and spring from the highest sense of duty. Could you look, sir, into your heart? Would you approve to the full sentiments which animate me? Nay, more, would you count me among the best and truest of your friends?" Again he looked at us all keenly. I had a growing conviction that this sudden change of his entire intellectual method was but yet another form or phase of his madness, and so determined to let him go on a little longer, knowing from experience that he would, like all lunatics, give himself away in the end. Van Helsing gazed at him with a look of utmost intensity, his bushy eyebrows almost meeting with a fixed concentration of his look. He said to Renfield in a tone in which did not surprise me at the time, but only when I thought about it afterwards, for it was as if he was one addressing an equal, Can you not tell me frankly your real reason for wishing to be free tonight? I will undertake, if you will satisfy me, a stranger, without prejudice, and with the habit of a keen, open mind, Dr. Seward will give me, at his own risk and his own responsibility, the privilege you seek." He shook his head sadly, and with a look of poignant regret on his face, the professor went on, "Come, sir, bethink yourself. You claim the privilege of reason to the highest degree, since you seek to impress us with your complete reasonableness. You do this, whose sanity, whose reason is to doubt, since you are not yet released from medical treatment for this very defect. If you will help us in our efforts to choose the wisest course, how can we perform the duty for which you yourself put up before us? Be wise and help us, and if we can, we shall aid you in achieving your wish." He still shook his head, and he said, "Dr. Van Helsing, I have nothing to say. Your argument is complete, and if I were free to speak, I should not hesitate a moment, but I am not my own master in this matter. I can only ask you to trust me. If I am refused, the responsibility does not rest with me." I thought it was now time to end the scene, which was becoming too comically grave, so I went towards the door, simply saying, "Come, my friends, we have work to do. Good night." As, however, I got near the door, a new change came over the patient. He moved towards me so quickly for a moment I feared he was about to make another homicidal attack. My fears, however, were groundless, as he held up his two hands imploringly and made his petition in a moving manner. As he saw that the very excesses of his emotions were mutilating against him by reasoning as more for our old relations, he became somewhat more demonstrative. I glanced at Van Helsing and saw my convictions reflected in his eyes, so I became a little more fixed in my manner, if not more stern, and motioned for him that his efforts were unavailing. I had previously seen something of the same continuously growing excitement in him when he had made some request in which, at the time, I thought was much such, for instance, when he wanted a cat, and I was prepared to collapse into the same sullen acquiescence on this occasion. My expectation was not realized, for when he found out that his appeal had not been successful, he got into quite a frantic condition. He threw himself on his knees and held up his hands, wringing them in a plaintive supplication, and poured forth a torrent of entreaty, with tears rolling down his cheeks and his face and form expressive in the deepest of emotion. "Let me entreat you, Dr. Seward. Oh, let me implore you to let me out of this house at once. Send me away however you will and where you will. Send keepers with me with whips and chains. Let them take from me the straitcoat, manacled and leg-ironed, even to a goyle. But let me out of this.
You do not know what you do by keeping me here. I am speaking from the depths of my own heart, of my very soul, that you know whom you do not know whom you've wronged, or how. But I may not tell you. Woe is me, I may not tell you. By all that you have hold sacred, by all that you hold dear, by your love that is lost, by your hope of the lives, for the sake of the Almighty, take me out of this and save my soul from guilt. Can't you hear me, man? Can't you understand? Will you never learn? Do you know that I am sane and earnest now, that I am no lunatic in a mad fit, but a sane man fighting for his soul? Oh, hear me! Hear me! Let me go! Let me go! Let me go!
I thought this longer this went on, the wilder he could get, so would bring on a fit. I took him by the hand and raised him up. Come, I said sternly, no more of this. We have had quite enough already. Get to your bed and try to behave more discreetly. He suddenly stopped and looked at me intensely for several moments, and then without a word, he rose and moved over and sat down beside the bed. The collapse had come, as the former occasion, just as expected. When I was leaving the room, the last of our party, he said to me in a quiet, well-bred voice, "You will, I trust, Dr. Seward, do me the justice to bear in mind later on that I did what I could to convince you tonight."